President Donald Trump faced some booing from the crowd at the FIFA Club World Cup final.
Philadelphia acknowledges that the Trump administration's general crackdown on immigration could impact their World Cup event.
The countdown to the 2026 World Cup is ticking louder by the day, but instead of celebration, a political and economic earthquake is threatening to rip marquee matches out of U.S. soil. What should have been America's golden stage to showcase its soft power to billions is turning into a brutal stress test for the Trump administration's trade and immigration policies. FIFA isn't bluffing. With just 90 days' notice, entire blocks of group stage matches could be pulled from the United States and sent north or south of the border. And here's the chilling part: this backup plan is already locked and loaded. The cause? A web of tariffs and visa barriers tightening around every part of the tournament. Visas like fortress walls. 12 countries are outright banned from entering, including Iran, already qualified for the tournament. Tens of thousands of fans are raced from the stands with the stroke of a policy pen. For those still eligible, a $250 visa integrity fee and wait times stretching over 300 days have made attending the World Cup nearly impossible. Tariffs strangling the supply chain. Every steel beam for upper decks, every LED scoreboard, every floodlight system is stuck at border checkpoints under new rules. Costs are skyrocketing, timelines slipping by weeks or even months. Stadiums are being forced to cut features and swap in cheaper materials, the kind the world will see clearly on live broadcasts.
We want them to come, we want them to celebrate, we want them to watch the game, but when the time is up, they'll have to go home.
The result? A double disaster for both the economy and America's reputation. Economy. Billions in tourism revenue could vanish if matches shift to Canada or Mexico. Hotels, restaurants, and bars, geared up for a record-breaking summer, could instead face empty rooms, mounting debt, and staff layoffs. Tens of thousands of seasonal workers, servers, translators, security personnel would lose the income they counted on to cover months of rent, medical bills, or debt payments. Reputation. The World Cup is a declaration of a nation's ability to deliver on the world stage. Losing matches not because of natural disaster or war, but because of domestic policy would leave a stain not easily erased. International organizers could start seeing the U.S. as a risky bet for future global events.
It is a great achievement to bring the World Cup next year, the FIFA World Cup in 26 here in the United States, together with Mexico and Canada.
Meanwhile, Canada and Mexico are quietly seizing the moment. Canada boasts political stability, world-class sports infrastructure, and fast, straightforward visa processing, visa-free for many countries. Vancouver and Toronto are already upgrading their stadiums to FIFA's highest standards. Mexico brings the pedigree of hosting the 1970 and 1986 World Cups, legendary venues like Estadio Azteca and BBVA, and an open-door entry policy for much of Latin America, fans who could fill stadiums with just a short flight. If FIFA pulls the trigger, the map of the World Cup will be redrawn. The U.S., once the centerpiece, could find itself pushed to the sidelines, watching Canada and Mexico take the spotlight. And this wouldn't just be a sporting loss, it would be a diplomatic collapse. The world won't remember who won the opening match, but they will remember how the U.S. lost it. In the game of soft power, the image of empty seats, relocated matches, and fans turned away at the border will outlast any highlight reel. The question now isn't whether America has the money or the stadiums. The question is, will the U.S. tear down the policy walls to keep the World Cup, or will it go down in history as the nation that lost it, not on the field, but in the meeting room?
Give me a chance to fix Canada. Give me a chance to get a new deal with Ottawa.
President Donald Trump says most trade deals will be finished by August 1st. But as for us,
we haven't really had a lot of luck with Canada. I think Canada could be one where they'll just pay tariffs, not really a negotiation.
Donald Trump just dropped a bomb. We haven't had much luck with Canada. It could be just a tariff, not really a negotiation.
We are looking for the best deal for Canada. We're only going to accept the best deal for Canada.
His blunt statement came just days before the August 1, 2025 deadline, when a 35% import tariff could hit Canadian goods outside of USMCA compliance. Meanwhile, Japan and the EU have already secured 15% auto tariff deals, leaving Canada cornered. The question now screams louder than ever. Is Canada still an independent economy or just a lonely Ottawa under U.S. pressure? Speaking before leaving for Scotland, Trump declared, "Canada may be one where we just apply tariffs, not negotiate." The U.S. still holds full authority to impose unilateral tariffs, making this threat real. Markets reacted instantly, and businesses on both sides of the border are bracing for August 1 as the deadline for a possible trade shock.
I think the best deal for Canada, which is what I believe our government is negotiating on right now, is not dependent on that date.
Canada's negotiators insist they won't rush into a bad deal. Ambassador Kirsten Hillman and Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc repeated, only the right deal for Canadian workers will be signed.
The Canadian delegation returns to Washington next week, even as there's little hope right now for a breakthrough.
The strategy makes sense. 80% of Canadian exports to the U.S. remain tariff-free under USMCA if all paperwork is properly filed. That lifeline allows Ottawa to wait, even though steel, aluminum, and softwood lumber are still stuck under sectoral tariffs. Prime Minister Mark Carney warns signing prematurely now would weaken our position for the critical 2026 USMCA review.
We can't rely on the Americans anymore. As simple as that. I love the Americans, by the way. I love the people. Love the elected officials, except one.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford pushed back sharply at Trump's comments, saying, "We buy more products from the U.S. than Japan, Korea, China, the UK, and France combined. Canada is America's biggest customer. We don't need to bow down." Ford launched a Buy Canadian campaign, urging provinces to prioritize domestic steel, aluminum, and vehicles. Yet reality is harsh. Ontario's GDP growth could slump to just 0.6% in 2025, far below expectations without the tariffs.
And I think Canadians understand that we've got to start acting.
Tensions among provinces are becoming more obvious. Ford's defiance reflects Ontario's anger, while Alberta and Quebec quietly pressure Ottawa to seek a faster compromise. Some premiers believe a prolonged standoff will hurt provincial economies too much to bear. Carney continues to insist on unity, but political rifts are showing. Critics say Ottawa is becoming increasingly isolated, while provinces feel forced to defend their own economic interests. The longer this drags on, the more Canada risks falling into what some call a soft economic civil war. Canada stands at a dangerous crossroads. Trump is signaling no patience for talks, and a 35% tariff could soon land like a hammer. Carney's tough stance buys time, but Ford's open rebellion exposes a Canada divided. Ordinary citizens are already struggling under rising costs and job uncertainty. If this standoff continues, the warning that Canada will soon be just a lonely Ottawa while its provinces look south to the U.S. may stop being a dramatic metaphor and become an inevitable reality.
The Canadian people want to see a deal. They want to get this thing over with because it's so volatile. You can't even buy whiskey in Ontario from Tennessee right now.
Canada is willingly stepping into America's economic trap. Kevin O'Leary's stark warning on Fox Business hit home just as U.S. Commerce Secretary Lutnick issued his blunt ultimatum. If Canada doesn't open its markets, tariffs won't just stay, they'll get higher. And as Washington tightens its grip, anger is boiling inside Canada. A new Fraser Institute report reveals that in 2024, the average Canadian family spent more on taxes than on food, housing, and clothing combined. People are asking the same bitter question. Are we paying taxes to protect our country, or just to watch it buckle under U.S. pressure? While Canadians tighten their belts, provinces are breaking away from Ottawa's control, steering themselves directly toward the U.S. orbit.
Canada is not open to us. They need to open their market. Unless they're willing to open their market, they're going to pay a tariff. I think the president's going to open between $300 and $400 billion of opportunity for Americans.
Lutnick's statement was more than diplomatic pressure. It was an economic ultimatum. Open markets, reduce barriers for U.S. firms, or face higher tariffs. The 25% tariff on steel and aluminum has already frozen major construction projects in Ontario, forcing companies to lay off workers. Beverage and food processing industries have lost billions of Canadian dollars as aluminum costs soared, forcing plants to cut production. Smaller textile and home appliance manufacturers have stopped exporting to the U.S., switching instead to act as subcontractors for American companies. But Canadians aren't just angry at Washington, they're furious with their own government. A Toronto resident told CBC, "We're paying record-high taxes, but Ottawa just sits there while America squeezes us harder every day." According to Fraser Institute, 46% of an average family's income now goes to taxes, federal, provincial, and consumption taxes combined. Meanwhile, spending on food, housing, and clothing together accounts for less than 38% of income. A family in Vancouver told a local paper, "We have to choose between paying property tax or buying fresh food weekly, and now we hear Ottawa might give in to the U.S. Whose interests are we paying for?"
The average Canadian family with an income of nearly $115,000 paid more than $48,000 in total taxes.
On social media, the hashtag taxed but ignored is spreading rapidly, with posts mocking the federal government. We pay taxes so Ottawa can stand there and watch America tighten the noose. While citizens grow restless, provinces are quietly, and sometimes openly, charting their own paths.
When we did some polling to find out how people felt about pipelines, we saw over 70% support in most provinces, including a majority support in Quebec.
Alberta has already signed preliminary agreements with U.S. oil giants, expanding exports directly without waiting for federal approval. Saskatchewan is coordinating with Alberta on rail logistics to prioritize mineral shipments to the U.S. despite Ottawa's trade regulations. Ontario publicly calls for a Buy Canadian policy, but major companies are quietly shifting production lines to Texas to avoid double tariffs. 80% of Alberta's oil already flows to the U.S., and the share is rising annually. Major logistics hubs are relocating from Quebec to Michigan to benefit from U.S. tax advantages. American investors are quietly gaining control over critical Canadian oil and mineral supply chains. Even a senior economic advisor close to Prime Minister Carney admitted privately, if this keeps up, in a few years, Ottawa won't be negotiating as a nation, it'll be watching as provinces sign their own deals with Washington. Canada is no longer just negotiating with the US, it's being pulled into its orbit. Washington sets the rules with tariffs and ultimatums. Canadians pay record taxes, yet see no protection for their own economy. Provinces are acting alone, while Ottawa looks more like a bystander than a leader. At this pace, the question isn't whether Canada can win a trade war, it's whether there will be a truly independent Canadian economy left to defend.
Do you think Mr. Carney understands Quebec?
I think he does not give a damn.
Canada's strong. We can give ourselves far more than anyone can take away. We're building this great country. I just met with the Premier.
Canada is facing the most serious federal crisis in decades, with Quebec now openly declaring it is exploring a sovereignty referendum, and Alberta charging ahead with plans for a 2026 separation vote. The very foundation of the nation is cracking.
Albertans could vote on leaving Canada as soon as 2026. That is the update from Premier Danielle Smith after she met with Prime Minister Mark Carney and after hundreds rallied for Alberta independence.
This is no longer about scattered voices of discontent. It is structured, organized, and planned. While Ottawa remains paralyzed in vague promises and recycled slogans, two of Canada's most powerful provinces are quietly drafting their exits. Premier François Legault has dropped all pretense. He publicly declared that Quebec is now actively considering holding a new referendum on sovereignty. This isn't just political posturing, it's a parting speech dressed as a press conference. Years of feeling sidelined culturally, linguistically, and economically have boiled over into a concrete path towards separation. Quebec asked Ottawa to reduce the number of temporary immigrants by 50%. The federal government never responded.
Of course, we would like to have a part of that.
Legault wants Canada to renegotiate the free trade agreement with the United States. Opposition parties are calling on the Premier to protect Quebec's interests.
Tensions flared when Prime Minister Mark Carney hinted he may support a Supreme Court challenge against Bill 96, Quebec's law protecting the French language. Legault slammed him publicly, declaring that Carney doesn't care about Quebec. Quebec sees this as an attack on its core identity, and it's fighting back. Premier Danielle Smith has already prepared the legal groundwork for Alberta's separation. The threshold for a referendum petition has been drastically lowered to 177,000 signatures. The vote is planned for 2026.
None of us knows what the future holds should Ottawa, for whatever reason, continue to attack our province, as they have done over the last decade.
Alberta passed the Sovereignty Act, along with the DIY guide for breaking up with Canada, timelines, legislation, procedural frameworks. In Alberta, 65% of UCP voters now support independence. In Quebec, sovereignty support has surged from below 30% to nearly 40% in just weeks. On social media, discussions about joining the U.S. as the 51st or 52nd state are growing. Even if half-joking, it shows a profound collapse in faith in Ottawa. Mark Carney is being criticized for barely mentioning Quebec's key industries, aerospace, forestry, and fisheries. After Quebec helped the Liberal Party gain seats in 2021, it now feels completely ignored. Carney's reaction? Ambiguous statements and soft gestures, described by critics as a sleep-deprived intern drafting farewell speeches at midnight. No commitment, no firm response, just delay. When two of your largest provinces begin drafting divorce papers while the federal government clings to old slogans and vague hopes, the dream of a unified Canada is quickly slipping away. Quebec and Alberta are no longer mere rebels. They are now organized political machines with real public support and structured exit plans. If Ottawa doesn't wake up, if it doesn't take real, concrete action instead of reciting hollow lines, then Canada may soon be nothing more than the lonely name of a capital city, isolated on a map that is quietly being redrawn.